Welcome to the October 22nd Oshkosh Common Council meeting. We'll call to order, and clerk, can you please take the roll?
Allison Osby.
Here.
Herman.
Here.
Ugerower.
Here.
Rousey.
Here.
Petrol.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Palmieri.
Here.
Present 7.
Councilmember Allison Osby will lead us in the invocation.
We come together this evening to discuss the issues that confront our city. May we always seek the wisdom to do things that reflect our concern for the people whom we represent.
Next, we have Layla Smeltnick and from Emmeline Cook and Atiatul Wahid from Oakland Elementary leading us in the pledge.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, because we pinch hit in this council. As you can tell, the mayor's voice is a little weak tonight, so I'm going to step in and introduce our students. They would turn around, face the audience. We appreciate them coming out and helping us with the Pledge of Allegiance. It's always nice that they take a few minutes out of their busy schedule, because I know how busy school is. So let's start with Layla. Why don't you tell us what school you go to, what grade you're in, and what's your favorite subject?
My name's Layla Smeltnick. I'm in 5th grade, and my favorite subject is social studies.
Social studies. All right, that's study of the world, isn't it? And your name again?
My name is Atia.
Okay, and you go to what school?
Oakland Owls,
And what grade are you in?
5th grade.
5th grade, and what's your favorite subject?
Gym.
Jim?
All right.
Nothing wrong with that.
There we go.
All right, we have a certificate of appreciation for the kids for helping us with the Pledge of Allegiance. You get a round of applause. And you're welcome to stay if you wish, or if you have other gym class to study for, or social studies, you're welcome. Thank you very much for helping us out.
Next, we have 2 presentations. The first, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Next, we have 2 presentations. Morgan Crossing Phase 2 is first on the list.
Good evening. Thank you for having me attend tonight. My name is Peter Youngbacher. My office address is 300 North Main Street in Oshkosh. And I am here to talk about the second phase of a project that was originally built about 10 years ago, which we call Morgan Crossing. And I think the slides are popping up on the screen. Morgan Crossing is located currently the first phase at 495 Dawes Street. It's generally located at the intersection of Pearl Avenue and Dawes Street, just south of the former St. Peter's campus. To give you just a little bit of background on sponsorship, I know that that's always a question to be raised when council members are looking at the viability of a transaction. I just wanted to give you a little bit of history of our developments in the community of Oshkosh to give you some context for the current proposal. One of our earlier projects is known as River Place Apartments. It's a 117-unit project located at the intersection of Congress Avenue and Summit. It was located on about 10 acres of land that formerly had been owned by the Payne Arboretum. The land had housed warehouses, was leveled during the 1974 tornado that hit Oshkosh. The site was fallow for 10 years. We purchased it in the mid-'80s and commenced to build River Place Apartments. At that point, it had the highest rents in town. It sort of was a stretch in terms of amenities and rent, and eventually grew into it after about 10 years. Second project, this is a neighbor of Morgan Crossing. It's called Concord Place. It's one of the earlier projects in the Marion Road Redevelopment District. It was built in 2003. 57 units, 3 stories, underground parking, higher ceilings, a fairly amenity-rich project for its time, primarily orientated towards students. The previous project, River Place, is primarily what I would call a mainstream project, but this one is primarily students, a fairly high density. I think it was built in conformance with the plan for the Marion District, which was to create some density and some street-side streetscaping for the district. Morgan Crossing Phase 1, located across the street from Concord Place, built in 2007, has 51 units, also has underground parking. Again, built, I think, in conformance with the master plan for the redevelopment district, which is to create higher density. We did that, again, with underground parking. Have 4 stories in parts of the project, 3 stories in the rest. The mix of this project is a bit different than what we're proposing for Phase 2 of Morgan Crossing. We do have some 3-bedroom units. We are not proposing to have 3-bedroom units in the next phase. We have about a third of the remaining units being 1-bedroom units and 2/3 being 2-bedroom units. This project is primarily occupied by university students or students who have recently graduated, although over time its mix has begun to change as we've had more and more multifamily developed in the neighborhood. University Loss, this is a fairly recent project. It's a rehabilitation of a 40-unit project at the intersection of High Avenue and New York. You can visualize it. It'd be on the southwest corner. The project was built in the 60s, had rather interesting interior unit layouts, had not had much reinvestment in it in the recent past. We bought it in March, I believe, and we've been running through a fairly comprehensive remodeling, gutting the inside, reskinning the outside. We're taking the energy costs on this project, utilizing something called PACE, which is Property Assessed Clean Energy Assistance, to drop it about 70% with triple pane windows, adding 60 R factor in the ceiling, skinning the outside with additional insulation, and replacing the boiler systems with on-demand systems versus a very inefficient old 60s style system. So an interesting project. It's had lots of twists and turns, but I think we're in the downward stretch, and we're hoping to have first units completed in December and ready for occupancy in January. We've also done some retail projects in the market, just a few of them. Probably the one that stands out is what I would call the former Menards site on Kayla Road. Bought it in the early 2000s when it was 10% occupied, re-tenanted it with the first generation of users. The recession came. We then took a deep breath and said we need to do more, so we entirely remodeled the exterior facade and actually tore down about half of it, rebuilt a Best Buy, a Party City, and a Ross, and then we added Ulta and Five Below. All of them are new entrants to the market. Did an outlot building with Noodles and Five Guys, and sold some land in the back to the city for that lake that you can see, which is one of the large retention ponds, and generally I think created a strong retail anchor in the middle of the Kayla Road retail complex. Then a couple of smaller buildings. Both sites had previously been occupied by underutilized housing or retail facilities that were functionally obsolete. We tore them down, rebuilt retail facilities. We have Cousins, Travel Leaders, 9 Round, and some others that are generally new entrants to the market. So that's the background, and I wanted to do that just to give you a little bit of sponsorship history so that you have a better idea of what we've done in the community and what our plans are now for this next generation of Morgan Crossing. Morgan Crossing Phase 2 will have 4 floors, 66 units, predominantly 2-bedroom units with some 1-bedrooms. It will have no 3-bedroom units. And part of that is we're trying to transition as we get further from the campus to get more and more towards mainstream housing. It's going to have underground heated parking again. We've built a number of projects in the community, and we have found that that's an amenity and a competitive standard that gives us an ability to charge higher rents, because obviously it's an amenity that costs more but is also appreciated by residents, and they're willing to pay for them. You have 9-foot ceilings. That's pretty much the standard in the market today for new projects. We do have individual HVAC units, so tenants can control both the cooling and the heating temperatures, and obviously the costs associated with that. We also find from a carbon footprint standpoint that you tend to see lower utilization when people are paying for the good as opposed to having the good included in the base price of their lease. Also, we'll have in-suite laundry facilities, washers and dryers. The kitchens will have stainless steel appliances, high-end countertops, granite countertops, and cabinetry. In terms of our target market, again, we're moving further away from the university. We're creating an amenity package which is at the high end. So we're looking for a tenant mix that includes young professionals, university staff, some senior living component, and co-housing. And by co-housing, I'm describing or defining that as where we have 2-bedroom units. We may have 2 unrelated adults living in a unit that are sharing rent, but they're not married, they're not engaged, they're not family members, but they're sharing an apartment which has 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and an ability to reduce their overall rent that they pay. An overhead of the location of the site, again, this is in the Marion District. This shot, I think, has the former factory location that's pre-annex development, but is one of the last larger sites available within that district. Another shot of it to give you a better view of what it remains. It's about 1.5 acres in size. Formerly, the site was utilized by Universal Foundry for a gray ductile foundry site, and had single-family homes on it. It also had a parking facility for UWO. This is the site plan for the second phase. It would be the building on the right of the screen. One change that you will note is when we originally designed this plan, the proposed Road A, which is at the bottom of the screen, was designed by the city, and as Annex built their project and developed it, the proposed Road A was no more. So there is no road at the south end of the site. We do have the road to the east, which would service our parking lot entrance as well as the water tower. This is the underground parking. Again, in order to accomplish the ratio of number of parking stalls to number of beds, and we've got a better than 1-to-1 ratio, underground parking is absolutely necessary. You may recall at one point I had some comments on the annex about the size of the parking field relative to the size of the building, and we've made the decision here that it's important for density purposes and for other design issues, including how we're going to accommodate things like Lyft and Uber and Federal Express and UPS delivery to our project, which is becoming a significant design issue for all real estate developers, that we needed to keep with the theme of underground parking. This is the first floor, and we'll have a stacked, after the first floor, the second, third, and fourth floor will all be the same in terms of footprint. First floor is a little bit different. We've got something designated as a fitness room. Actually, that's going to be a package delivery room, so that we'll have an ability for packages to be delivered for our residents. We have again found that 10 years ago it wasn't an issue. Today it's a major issue. It's a constant stream of internet delivered items, and that'll be a secured locked room with cameras monitoring people's activity, much like the Amazon Go concept. If you've seen that, You go in, you grab things, you have an account, and you leave, and you don't have to do anything more than that because everything that you have done has been traced. So those packages will have that same security feature associated with them. And this is the view for the second, third, and fourth floor. Again, we've dropped the 3 bedrooms. We're focusing more on 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms, given the demand that we have for the existing facility and the perceived demand that we think we'll have for the new addition. Another elevation shot looking south from the north side of Pearl Avenue. The facade will look very similar to this, except we'll have a full 4th floor. It'll be an all-brick exterior. All the units have outside access via patio doors and patio decks. Kitchen style, this is a kitchen from, not from the first phase, but from a recently done project in De Pere. Stainless steel appliances, granite countertops, designer faucets, microwaves, dishwashers, under-counter lights, fairly common theme here, and typically the kind of kitchen that you would see in someone's residence. And that's, again, the competitive standard in the world today. Bathrooms finished out at the same level, tile tub surrounds, designer faucets, tile floors, energy-saving water closets. I mentioned PACE financing earlier. As part of our proposed capital stack, we will be using a PACE energy financing component. PACE is a program that has been enabled, enabled by statute in Wisconsin. It's operated essentially from the Department of Energy via administrators in each state. Each county then elects to participate in the program. Winnebago County has elected to participate. The first PACE financing occurred in Wisconsin in December of 2017. Since that time, there have been approximately 15 or 16 PACE financings that have been completed. As I alluded to earlier, we're using PACE financing for the remodeling of the University Lofts project on High End in New York. And we anticipate using PACE financing as part of our capital stack to help us reach more and get more amenities into our project with this new phase at Morgan Crossing. The way that the PACE financing works is it attaches the debt obligation at the property tax level. So it primes the first mortgage or subordinate mortgage that you would normally see on a property. It is a non-recourse, assumable financing instrument that can be prepaid or can continue with subsequent owners of the property if you chose to sell the property at a later date. Ineligible properties include, in our case, the criteria is multifamily units with 5 units or more. So that's the brief analysis of what we'd like to present to you. I know that we didn't want to get too far into the weeds. We're trying to give you a concept of what we're going to be presenting in more detail upon the formal submission of our TIF proposal at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. Peter, can you ballpark a number here for us, what it's going to add to the tax base? I just did some quick math. I'm thinking $8 million.
Yes, current assessed value on the parcel is $184,000, the taxable increment. And I can tell you we're going through value engineering and cost analysis with contractors and our staff right now. That's a number that at the end of the day has a high probability of being hit. I would have said a number between $7 million and $8.5 million.
Okay.
And the reason for that is costs are the things we really don't control very much in this world. What we do control is how we put the capital stack together. And we're trying to control costs to the extent we can. Our original proposal came in at a eye-popping amount, and we had to go back and sort of redo some things. But that's a safe range. And again, I think I could say with a 95% probability that we could hit a $7 to $8.5 million increment above the current 184 assessment.
I'm not trying to hold you to it, I'm just ballparking.
But
so-
we're doing that analysis as well to figure out on the TIF what we can amortize, what amount of TIF out over what period of time.
I just took $110,000 a unit, which is kind of where things are at nowadays to kind of ballpark it, so, and I'm sure you hate that.
I wish they were.
And then my next question, I guess, is when would you start if we approve your TIF and everything? Would you be prepared to start in the spring?
That would be our goal, given the timetable that we've discussed and had outlined to us by city staff. We would probably start in March or April, and we would be complete by January,
Sure.
depending upon weather. We do have some soils considerations at the site. As I said, this was the former foundry site. There has been, when the university was there was some activity done to address their parking lot. There are some contaminated soils at, ironically, the highest level, not the lowest level. Fortunately, there is not any significant contamination of petroleums or other things that have caused a plume. They would have to be sort of dug until you found the end of it, kind of thing. So I think we're in pretty good shape as it relates to environmental conditions. It's not greenfield, so there are going to be costs, but it's not going to be costs that are going to, I think, tip the scales and make it undoable.
Thank you.
Other council questions? I just have a couple. Will there be any below market rate affordable units, or are these all market rate? Or above market rate?
There will be no officially set aside market rate unit, below market rate units. However, I think I should point out that our proposed market rents are actually below the WIDA standards for the 80% median income for Winnebago County by several $100s. Just to give you the exact number, the latest standards for multifamily tax subsidy income projects in Wisconsin put the one-bedroom affordable level at $1,174 and the two-bedroom level at $1,408. Our budgeted rents for our one-bedrooms are going to be in the 900 range, and the two-bedrooms are going to be in the 1,300 range. So in both cases, we're below the indexed amounts for the 80% set aside under the WIDA guidelines, which goes to a whole different set of questions as to why that is and why the market doesn't, the open market or the unsubsidized market allow us to charge more for that kind of product.
And then just another follow-up question, and that is, I noticed in some of the photos, there's like overhead microwaves and different layouts. Will there be any accessible universal design elements to this?
Yes, there will be, by code, I think there'll be 3 units that have accessibility requirements built into them, so they'll have radius turns in kitchens and bathrooms, under-counter access for wheelchairs, lower light switches, things of that nature to accommodate the ADA requirements for the project. The building will be fully sprinklered. It'll have a full set of life safety components to it that will meet all current standards and then some. And in addition to that, again, as technology keeps unfolding in our industry, we keep trying to keep a pace with our buildings and try and future-proof them as much as we can. We will be adding a fairly robust pipe of internet access to each individual resident within the building and accessibility within their unit through a variety of technologies, including technologies that will allow them to control their individually assigned HVAC unit, both remotely and within their unit. So the transformation of technology in our world has come late, but it's come finally. And there are a host of products that I think will allow us to reduce our carbon footprint on this building. And the PACE program, I hope that you'll see more of this come to you from other developers in the community, is relatively new, but it's going to be a very valuable and effective tool for developers to reduce carbon footprints for their developments. And we, as I indicated at the project on High in New York, we put triple pane windows in a multifamily apartment project. I can't think of another project that has triple pane windows in it. Our goal is to drive down energy costs by 70% at that project, and I think we're, based on the analysis, it has to be done by PACE because they provide funding only to prove it.
So we're at 25 minutes now. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry.
If you could
I'm done.
make your final comments.
Thank
Thank
I have
you.
no more. I'm just
All
answering
right.
questions, so.
No, it's a great looking
Thank you.
project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next presentation is on Cabrini School.
Good evening, Counselor. My name is Tim Hess. Pleasure to be back up here again. Today I am here to talk to you a little bit about the St. Francis Cabrini Redevelopment Project, which is, we're proposing it to be a low-income senior housing project. The developers in this particular case are North Point Development. The two primaries of that corporation is Cal Schultz and Andy Dumke. In this North Point development, these guys are really probably one of the premier low-income developers in the state, and they're looking to do something here in Oshkosh. So, of course, going through the analysis, they've kind of come to the conclusion, and having now encountered a fair number of developers that are looking to do low-income projects and attending the WIDA conference, it turns out that many of these projects really can't happen without any sort of TIF assistance. And so we're coming here to potentially ask that of you guys and give you an idea of what this project would entail. So we're talking about the St. Francis Cabrini School. It's on the corner of Merritt and Boyd, right next to the St. Mary's Church. If we look at it from, say, the north facing south, there's the facade. If you look at it from the Boyd Road, there's that particular facade. This thing had been in a part of the Catholic school system for a fair number of years, and it has now been empty for the last 3 years, that they're no longer using this. And that particular community has been reaching out, trying to find, that religious community has been reaching out, trying to find something to do with this particular site. They're also trying to find what the most appropriate thing to do is with that particular church, and if somebody could give us ideas of what we could do with churches, we could do great things, because there's a lot of them that are sitting vacant. But we're going to deal with the school. So here's what it is that they are proposing. They have already gone in, and I'm thinking it's Plan Commission, they've started to ask to separate that individual parcel there, cut it in two. These developers then would purchase off from the community there, the school portion of it, and put in approximately 35 low-income senior units, and also put in a fair number of garage units to be associated with it. The parking lot in between that would technically still be owned by the church with the shared access agreement. And so too would there be a shared access agreement for the parking lot to the south of the church there. But so that's what it is that they're looking to do. We've had RH Design Build kind of go in and give us an initial idea. This project, these low-income projects, are slightly different from the typical development project in that for this to happen, the developers need to qualify for low-income housing tax credits through WIDA. So they've put together enough information to try to understand the guts of what the project would be. They don't have full detailed plans of everything, and they wouldn't attempt to get the architect to do that. In this case, the architect is in RH Design Build. They won't get the full detailed plans until they actually receive tax credits from WIDA. So here's what they're looking at. They've got a garden level there, a first floor, and a second floor with basically a bunch of 1- and 2-bedroom sort of units. One of the dilemmas of these older schools is that the classrooms kind of make a natural separation but then how much space you have really kind of limited to this project to be something like a senior sort of housing project. So there's a fair number of one-bedroom units, 24 one-bedroom units, and 11 two-bedroom units in the overall project. So this gives you an idea of the rents and the level of income that we're going to be serving here. They're going to do an income averaging approach. If you qualify for WIDA tax credits, you've got to guarantee that whatever number of units you want to apply for the tax credits meet certain income requirements. And so we've got 40% of the community median income. We're proposing that maybe would have 8 units in one bedroom there. The rent for those individuals would be $535, and it goes up as their level of income goes up. So the highest level would be, we've got a number of units that are at the 80% CMI, and so we're anticipating a spread there. We don't know exactly what it'll be, but we got to guarantee an average across the entire project to qualify for those tax credits. And it gives you an idea of what then the rent would be in this situation. So I want to give you a little idea of the WIDA approach to doing this and low-income housing tax credits. There's really kind of 2 different ways to do it, or 2 different deals that people put together. There are the 9% deals, and then there are the 4% deals. The 9% deals are highly competitive. In both of these, there's this scoring algorithm that you go through where you look at things like walkability score, what's close to you. You look at, is this right along a bus route? You look at all the things that low-income people may be looking for amenities, and you get scores on the basis of that. You get scores on the basis of your capital stack and whether this will financially work out. You get scores on all sorts of different things. And it turns out that this is very competitive. And the benefit that you get then, if you actually get a project that qualifies for the 9% program, is you get 9% tax credits of the cost over 10 years. And you look at that and say, well, that's 90% of the overall value. Well, it is, yeah, but then you factor in time value of money, and it turns out that maybe you're going to get 60 to 70% of your overall value to try to put together a project like this. The other dilemma with the 9% deals is that you're limited to 2 of them in any given year. So a developer like these 2 gentlemen tend to only apply for 9% projects that are relatively large. And this, we're limited to 35. That isn't really large, so there's no way we're going after a 9% on this particular deal. This last year, WIDA awarded $19.5 million worth of low-income housing tax credits, and that's spread across all the different set-asides. So there are set-asides for historic, there are set-asides for nonprofits, and then there's just market rate, anything goes kind of thing. That's the overall amount. Given that this is a much smaller project, these gentlemen are proposing a 4% deal. This is less competitive, but there is still a scoring component to it. What you get in this case is approximately 4% of the cost over 10 years, and now the state has implemented a state component of it where they give you another 4% over 6 years in state tax credits. There's no limit on the number of projects, but the amount of money that are allocated to this is substantially less. And so, when they initially looked at this, these guys have looked at things like the Beach Building, the Washington Building, where we've come in, we've asked for TIF dollars. We took that and we combined it with historic tax credits. This project will be a historic tax credit project also, so that will play into this. But with the Beach Building, Washington Building, Granary project, we came in, we asked for historic tax credit and TIF, and we said, we need 27 years from you guys, and I appreciate why you guys all cringed at that. But at the same time, we were saying, but our internal rate of return is only like 1 or 2%. And so there was kind of the reason why we were asking for that. And so what we're looking for here is we're looking for TIF, we are looking for historic tax credit, and we're looking for this LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits, to try to make this something that is palatable. Except because we are taking low income, well, that makes the value in terms of the assessment less, the amount of revenue that's coming in. We're guaranteeing we're taking that less. So what we've come to is potentially a deal here where we're going to be asking for approximately 20 years, and the rate of return, well, we'll get to that, but it still isn't that good. So in terms of a timeline for this, I've said these guys need to apply through WIDA. So to be able to make this happen, we are going to bring a TIF application into the city tomorrow. Actually, I think I got Thursday morning, but I know back there they're going to tell me I got to have it in here tomorrow. So we've got all the financials in place. We understand what's going on. We need to get an application to WIDA by, we believe it's January 15th. And so what we are asking for is to get this process through council and potentially have approval maybe by the first council meeting in January, like January 14th. So we can submit that application, and then it would take up until basically April is when WIDA announces the awards. And if we get the award, then this project would go forward. If we don't get the award, chances are this project isn't going to go forward, and then I'm not sure how we're going to handle it from the city standpoint if this turns into something like, say, the Shopko TIF, where the TIF was approved, but we never actually submitted it because the project wasn't going to move forward. So this is a little different from typical sorts of projects that have come up through Council for TIF. So here's kind of that setup that I was talking about, that in this particular case, North Point Development is coming to you asking for a TIF. These guys are going to serve as the developer. They have to put together this deal. They have to get the capital stack. They have to figure out the financing. They have to figure all this out and apply to WIDA. If they apply to WIDA and they get the tax credits awarded, then they will end up selling ownership to this to an equity investor. They will end up selling 99.9% ownership to an equity investor, and they will hold on to it for 15 to 17 years then. But what has to happen for these guys, from Andy and Kel's standpoint, is they have to guarantee that this project is going to qualify for the tax credits, both the historic and the low-income housing tax credits. So they've got to hire a project management firm that is qualified to ensure that all those tenants that are going in there are actually qualified. Because if they mess that up, the tax credits don't come in, the equity investor is upset, and these guys are going to have to pay for it out of their own pocket. So that's kind of the dilemma, the strategy that's going on here. Again, they got to guarantee that those tax credits are going to come in. So we are applying, these guys are applying for it so that the equity investor will end up getting the benefit of the TIF and the tax credits. So overall, we're looking at overall cost for this particular project is $7.35 million. We're looking for $500,000 from the council or from the city through the TIF approach. Again, I had said that because we are getting low income, the actual assessed value of the ending property isn't going to be too awfully high. Therefore, I can't get that amount of money too awfully quickly, so we're still looking at a 20-year payback. But the investor internal rate of return on this, I project it to be 3.28%. It's pretty low. Typically, they're shooting for 4% to 5% on these sort of deals here. So this is why we think we need it. The benefit to us is hopefully we are proactively addressing a historic building before it goes to substantial blight and we get low-income housing for seniors. Any questions?
Any project?
Thank you.
Councilmember Peschel.
So is it going to be specifically seniors, or is it going to be
Specifically seniors.
specifically seniors? So do you, does HUD give, not HUD, does WIDA give out a specific designation for senior-only properties?
My understanding is they do. This is Cal and Andy
Okay,
proposing this, yes.
good,
I think that's one of the set-asides.
okay.
Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. What, 55, is that senior? I mean.
55.
It is, okay, all right. And then if we approve your TIF, when do you think construction would start?
So if you approve the TIF, it has to be the TIF and the tax credits.
Right, I understand. I mean, if.
April, We'd get that going. It generally takes 6 months for them to syndicate, find that equity investor. So it's probably not until the fall of next year before they would actually start to build. They would try to have it fully leased up by December of the following year so that they technically qualify for the tax credits then. So it would probably be fall of next year that they would start, and middle summer of the following year for completion and start to lease it up.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just a quick question, that is accessibility for,
You have to.
Yeah.
Yep.
okay, so elevators,
I don't necessarily know elevators. I know ramps for sure, that there's a minimum number of units that have to qualify for it. I'm not sure if these guys were intending to put an elevator typically this small. I'm going to guess not, but
Probably
So
be
if we
the
have-
first floor. The
first
first
floor
floor
would be all
be
the
for the
accessible. Yes.
accessible.
so basically, we would only have 14 accessible units for people 55 plus.
No, people with disabilities.
55 plus.
Visitable,
saying.
Accessible, yeah. It's not, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Paschal?
Sure. So I was taken back by the units on I think you referred to it as the garden level, so, at the basement level. So, my question is, I assume if we're going to have housing underground, that it's going to be sprinkled, there's going to be sprinklers throughout the building and everything, so everything
And
is.
the Washington building and the beach building, really.
Sure.
The beach building didn't have residential units, but they all had these garden level sort of units, half
Sure.
underground kind of thing. So it's,
Well, and to your comment about WIDA kind of gives you points for those accessible items and
Right.
and making things more, creating a good solid sprinkler and smoke fire remediation plans. So, okay, thank you. I was just wondering about that.
thank you.
Thank you. Next is the first opportunity for citizen statements to council. Pam, do we have anyone registered for citizen statements?
Yes, we do. Jane Daughtery, 11 Caniff Court.
Citizens are to address the council only. Statements are limited to 5 minutes, must address items that are not listed on the council meeting agenda, are limited to issues that may have an impact on the city of Oshkosh. And the common council may address at a future meeting, must not include endorsements or any candidates or other electioneering. Hey, Jane. Welcome.
Yes. Good evening. I'm here to address speeding on city streets. 2 weeks ago, I was traveling north on Bowen Street, and I guess being old school, I was going 25 miles an hour, and I noticed in my rearview mirror, there are headlights on my bumper pushing me to go faster, and I felt intimidated. So I bumped it up to 28, but that wasn't fast enough. So this person passed me in a residential neighborhood, 25-mile-hour zone, and we both reached the stoplight on Murdoch Street at the same time. So what did this person accomplish? And I've also noticed whenever I'm traveling west on Witzel, usually 3 or 4 cars ahead of me, I notice the car weaving from lane to lane to try to get the best advantage point on how I can have a free rein to go faster. So, and then also the roundabouts, I know the posted limit is 15, but sometimes it feels like demolition derby on a Saturday night. Zoom, zoom, zoom. And I'm thinking, what is this obsession with speed? If the limit is 25, people want to go 35. If it's posted at 30, they want to go 40. And I've noticed, and so have my friends, and I don't understand it, that drivers look and act angry. And where is this anger coming from? And where is this obsession with speed? I don't understand it. So then I'm thinking, why does the city even spend time and money constructing and posting speed limit signs? What's the point? Because there's so many people that don't obey those limits. So that was my observation that I wanted to share with you tonight. And I'm thinking if there was anything else I wanted to say. Pretty much, I guess as a lighter note, I was thinking of that song from decades ago, slow down, you move too fast, you want to be groovy, slow down. So if you want to be groovy, slow down. And maybe we could develop some public service announcements about what happened to being courteous and polite on our roadways. So I'm feeling not safe traveling the streets, and it's like I ventured out tonight to come here, so I hope I get home safely, or I might need a police escort to get home. That's it.
Councilmember Miller?
Gene, could you hang on one second? Just hang on one second. I think we're doing a great job. I'm gonna throw our city manager under the bus here, but aren't our speeding tickets and traffic violations up several $100,000 this year?
To quote Jane, our police department has been anti-groovy this past year. Our numbers are up. We are doing some targeted enforcement. We've added our motorcycle unit 2 years ago, and I think it's had some results. I would beware in the roundabouts, so keep your pace that you've been doing, Jane. You'll be fine.
But I still don't understand why some citizens feel self-entitled, that they're just oblivious to other people on the roadway. And what happened to politeness? Don't they teach that in driver's ed? Or I'm thinking adults need some remedial training, how to be polite and courteous to other drivers on our city streets.
That's an excellent reminder.
Here, here.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, did you?
Yes,
want to
yeah.
weigh in?
I appreciate you also providing this public service announcement for everyone, Jane, and I think City Manager Roloff said it well, but I drive to work every day on Bowen, and I know the police have been out there in that area quite frequently, so I think they're working on it, but we always appreciate any public awareness that can be provided, so thank you.
Right, but can you imagine how frightening that was to see these headlights on my bumper pushing me to go faster and whatever. So I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else registered?
Yes, Steve Barney, 335 Summit Avenue.
And if we have anyone else registered, if you could move towards the front. Do we have anyone else?
Mr. Norton is signed up for the citizen statements at the end, but if he'd like to speak at the beginning, we'd welcome him. And then he also has handouts, if you could give it to Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
Hello. I think maybe 2-3 years ago, I donated copies of these books by the IPCC. They call them pamphlets. And I donated these are 4 of them, a summary of each of their working group reports from the last assessment report. And each of the booklets or pamphlets, even though they're like over 100 pages, has a summary for policymakers in the beginning, which is maybe 30 pages or so. And so that's kind of written for you guys. And I want to encourage you to at least take a look at the highlighted headlines in the summary for policymaker in each of those pamphlets or booklets. And Pam has a copy of them. She brought them up at my request. I've heard that they haven't been checked out much. So I'm kind of following up on that. I doubt that anybody has looked at them, actually. But, so there's a summary for policymakers at the beginning of each of those booklets. Please take a look at that, okay? Is anybody, I'm not seeing any response. Is anybody interested in the summary for policymakers? No response?
I believe, isn't this item on the agenda later?
Parts of it, yeah.
Okay.
I was told I needed to speak during citizen statements.
Thank you, yes.
This is regarding also to, I'm not getting any response. Is there any interest in the booklets that I donated? Or should I just take them back and do something else with them? What should I do? Can you answer my question?
Councilmember Peschel?
I would like you to keep them here at City Hall with us and make them available to, Pam has them available to us, so
They are.
I will take a
okay.
look at them.
I thought they were appropriate documents, appropriate literature for you guys, because they are written for, they each have a summary for policymakers. And as you, I assume that you saw the emails that I sent on this issue, climate change, in the last week or so. And I suggested that since I saw Executive Order 38 by the Wisconsin Governor, Tony Evers, directing the state to work with city governments and others to figure out what they can do or what we can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our state. I thought that it would be, it just occurred to me it might be easy to direct the city manager to simply give the governor's office a call and see if there's anything they can do to help us reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We have already officially decided that we want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. The SAB has now published 2 documents on, one is the greenhouse gas inventory and the other one is a target setting document. And I reminded you in an email about that today in case you haven't seen it yet. So I'm suggesting that you just simply direct the city manager to contact the state governor, Tony Evers, rather than sending it to the SAB. A thing like that, I mean, I'm asking for to do something a little more direct. We have been working on this since 2007. It's 12 years now, and we still don't have a climate action plan as far as I know. But you do have somewhere to start. You do have a start, and this is, something. The things that we have done were basically done by largely because of the help of the federal government. Now we now again have a state government that's behind this initiative, at least at the governor's level, in the governor's office. So I want you to just tap into that and see. I don't think it would be a huge time-consuming thing if there's, through the city manager, if there's anything the state can do to help us, and then ask the city manager to report back with an update. I don't think it's very painful. I've been inspired to approach this issue again by the recent activism of Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swedish activist who I quoted in my email. She is standing up for future generations and the young people, because this is an issue that has an outsized effect on people in the future. It's called, and so their protesting was philosophers call dateism, which is discrimination against future people. And that's what climate change really involves, because of the nature of the beast. It has a bigger effect in the future than it does for those who actually emit the pollution. It has effects that go on for centuries, and it just gets worse and worse over centuries, because it's a strange phenomenon that's hard to explain, but if you look at these booklets, that might help. Does anybody, I'm not feeling very encouraged. Should I feel encouraged?
Mr. Barney, I would draw your attention, if you'd like to listen later, we will be receiving an update on our strategic plan initiatives.
Okay.
Third quarter, and part of that is there are specific objectives regarding executing our Clearwater initiatives as well as improving our city buildings and improving energy efficiency. I don't know if that necessarily specifically addresses what you're asking, but I think there is interest. So
Okay.
I appreciate the reminder and the nudge. Thank you.
I'm not always so good at reading body language. Can I just add one last quick thing? Mr. Youngbacher just did a presentation on his energy efficient building project. And I want to encourage you to encourage him to get those buildings Energy Star certified. The Energy Star is part of it's an EPA program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, a federal government program. And they can certify entire apartment buildings as Energy Stars. And when you do that, the tenants are, you will ensure that the tenants benefit from energy efficiency as well as the owner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mike Norton, 1029 South Main Street.
Thank you. I'm Mike Norton. As many of you know, I'm on the county board, and because of that, I'm on the county health board. What I come here today is because a couple meetings ago, Councilman Krause said he was concerned about the issue of e-cigarettes and vaping in the city of Oshkosh. And this is what I'm basically going to talk about tonight. Let me give you a little background. About 5 years ago, the health board passed, and the county passed a regulation that said limited or reduced the use of e-cigarettes and vaping in county buildings. Since that time, we've had two communities, this city council and Indiana City Council, passed ordinance dealing with youth and use of vaping and e-cigarettes. As in the city of Neenah has passed a ordinance dealing with vaping in indoor facilities, which we have before you. Now, at our health board earlier this month, we did a couple things. First of all, we passed a resolution encouraging support and passage of a state pass to include e-vaping or e-cigarettes in the statewide smoking ban. But I'm going to tell you the truth, I don't know how successful that is to be passed. But if you want to take up the same issue, I can give you a copy of the resolution. What I do come before you is to ask, and I asked our health director, if maybe we could have a policy locally. Now, our corporation council told our health department director that if we passed one, that we had to work with local municipalities, which I am more than willing to do so. So what I'm asking for, you look at the Neenah City ordinance, because they passed it. They incorporate or use it by amending it towards the statewide smoking ban. The only controversial thing I watched the city council meeting was about they don't have any vaping in any indoor places, even vaping stores. That's the little controversial. But what I am asking is to try to get a county-wide consistent policy. What I'm asking is that the administrative people, the corporation councils and the law enforcement people get together to work out an agreement and then present it to your city council. You take it up. I'll take it up to my county board and the health board, and hopefully get my national included, and then everyone's included, and I guess we'd have to include it since already passed one. So that's what I'm asking for tonight. So from what I understand, the way the smoking ban is enforced is by the local law enforcement officials, and I guess, and I don't know how it's done, but I guess you'd have to contact officials if you think someone's banning that or has banned that. So I don't think it's a big stretch, even though my health department official, Doug Gearing, said the capacity, I just one more included there that they're already doing. So that is what I'm asking. You can investigate the ordinance yourself. I respectfully ask, the administration to contact the health officials, and hopefully we can do something that's not been done in the state yet. It's a consistent state or a county policy on vaping and e-cigarettes.
Councilmember Allison Osby?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Norton. So I guess the question I would have for you is, considering that there are existing businesses, I know in our, obviously in the city of Oshkosh, I would assume probably perhaps in Neenah, would the current existing businesses that do sell or market be grandfathered in? And then from such a date forward, you're proposing that they cannot? Or any new businesses cannot?
I can only refer to when I saw that city in Neenah debate on it, Councilman. I think they banned, I don't think they grandfathered. I think they someone tried to grandfather. They don't grandfather. And maybe that, like I say, maybe that's something that we work out between all 2 or 3 parties. And like I say, that's the one thing when I saw the debate, I thought it was a little controversial. I mean, you don't let vaping and vaping shorts, I thought that was a little controversial. But from what I understand, and you can back to more, is they don't allow any of it, and I think it's no grandfather. That's what I gathered from that.
Okay. Councilmember Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. Lynn, is it easier just to duplicate the smoking ban in the city and just say vaping and smoking in all designated areas? Is that?
Without looking at it, can I tell you, we do need to do the research to make sure we have a sound health, safety, and welfare background, so that if we pass something, it will stick and be enforceable. So it's on my list to work on, but as you know, we're still short-staffed.
Sure,
so
I understand.
It will probably be over the winter when we
Okay.
get the time to do that research.
And Mr. Norton, I think the council's 100% behind this. It's just, we want to do it right. We want to make sure it benefits all of our citizens. So thank you very much, though.
As this is on the agenda for later discussion, I appreciate the input, Mr. Norton, for that future discussion. Do we have anyone else registered for citizen statements?
No one else is registered.
All right, we'll move on to consent agenda items. Do we have anyone registered to speak on consent agenda items? or-
Yes, we do. For resolution 19553, we have Dennis Kavanaugh, 1107 Merritt Avenue.
Mr. Kavanaugh?
Good evening, I'm Dennis Kavanaugh, and I see this item's on the agenda. I want to encourage it. You already, you voted in favor of this when we brought it up from the greater neighborhoods. And this is the bid process for the actual equipment. It turns out to be the same dollar amount, and that was the only company that bid on it to meet with those specs. But again, I wanted to encourage it. The new trail is in. I can see the spots for the equipment. I think it's going to be a delightful process when they're all in place. I encourage you to vote for that.
Thank you. Any other registered to speak for consent agenda?
No, we do not.
Okay, bring it back to council for a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Okay. Can we please take the roll on consent agenda?
Allison Osby?
Aye.
Herman?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Rousey?
Aye.
Peschel?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
Moving on to new ordinances, ordinance 19565, designate the intersection of West 11th Avenue and Minnesota Street as a four-way stop. Traffic and Parking Advisory Board recommends approval. Staff recommends waiving the rules and adopting on first reading. Do we have anyone registered to speak on 19565?
We have no one registered.
Okay, back to council for a motion and a second on waiving the rules.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion about waiving the rules. Can we please call the roll?
Allison Osby?
Aye.
Herman?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Rousey?
Aye.
Peschel?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
And we'll take a motion for 19565.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Okay, very good. Please take the roll on 19565.
Allison Osby?
Aye.
Herman?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Krause?
Aye.
Peschel?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
Next is 19566, update parking regulations on Starling Avenue, Oregon Street, Arizona Street, 18th Avenue, and 23rd Avenue. Traffic and Parking Advisory Board recommend approval. Staff recommends waiving the rules and adopting on first reading. Do we have anyone registered to speak on the parking regulations?
No one is registered.
Back to council for motion and a second on waiving the rules.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Councilmember Peschel?
Sure. I am the council rep on the Traffic and Parking Review Board. I guess I'm looking for the rationale as to why we would waive the rules on this. When we discussed it in committee, I think 2 weeks ago, there was no discussion of the need to waive the rules, so please provide that rationale.
Sure. Yeah, I can answer that. So for the parking regulations on 23rd, Oshkosh Corp requested that we get that done as soon as possible. They're having an issue with, they have vehicles which they're retrofitting in their facility, and when they exit the garage, they're having an issue with seeing vehicles oncoming, especially with Oregon being closed. There's more traffic going down 23rd. However, so in the past, they remembered from past issues that it had been done before, so they requested if you could waive the rules to get that done. And then in conjunction with that, putting the parking ordinances together as one makes it easier for our staff, because once we have to do the locates and go out and change the signs. I can answer questions on the other, there's a couple other minor changes. One's around Smith School, which is being open. So rather than reinstalling those signs that were taken down, we just won't be reinstalling them, so we're updating the ordinance to match that as well. So those are the two rationales. Oshkosh Corp's the main rationale, but also with the street reopening, if we could get those regulations taken care of around Smith, now would be better than waiting a few more weeks.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Can we please take the roll on waiving the rules?
Allison Osby?
Aye.
Herman?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Krause?
Aye.
Peschel?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
And back to the resolution 19566 for updating the parking regulations.
moved.
Second.
Did we have anyone registered on that to speak?
No, we did not.
Okay. Discussion. Seeing none, can we please take the roll?
Allison Osby?
Aye.
Herman?
Aye.
Mugrower?
Aye.
Krause?
Aye.
Peschel?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
Next is council discussion, direction of city manager, and future agenda items. Future agenda items, first we have a request to seek assistance from state of Wisconsin to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Deputy Mayor Herman.
Thank you, Mayor. As most of us heard from Mr. Barney tonight and the emails that we received, I thought it was proper to go through our committees first before council directs the city manager, but I guess I'll leave it open to discussion if council feels we have enough information to have staff. I would imagine Mr. Roloff would designate someone from planning to contact, the governor's office to move forward and see what all entails with his executive order, or have the sustainability committee look at it first and make a quick recommendation and move forward. Just thought I'd bring it forward because as he said, we've been talking about this for quite a few years. There's some new initiative on the state level this time through the governor's office, and I thought it was appropriate to bring it forward for council discussion.
Councilmember Krause.
I'm the council rep at SAB. I'd like the opportunity for us to go through it just to make sure we get our points before we send a letter out to the governor. I mean, it's kind of like the first one is the most important one. So.
Councilmember Krause, as I recall, the SAB, the Sustainability Advisory Board, had part of their action plan already addressing reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
But we'd like to come up with some kind of a recommendation, what to
a
say
specific
specifically.
recommendation
Yeah.
to support the Executive Order 38? Okay, just clarifying. Councilmember Peschel.
Sure, I guess to Councilmember Krause's comment there, I don't think there's an issue with doing both. I think the Sustainability Advisory Board, there's nothing wrong with them continuing to work at ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And I think it's a proactive move for us to initiate Mr. Roloff or a designee of his choice to have conversations with the state in this area. So I kind of support both options there.
And I guess my only point would be that every decision we make with regard to land use impacts greenhouse gas emissions. So if we're mindful of that, that's another aspect to that discussion. So city manager is looking for direction.
If that's a consensus, if that's a consensus, I can certainly follow, either or option. So if you'd like me to get working on it and perhaps provide feedback to the SAB.
Deputy Mayor Herman.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess in thinking of kind of out loud about the whole discussion, it wouldn't hurt for staff to reach out to the governor's office, find out what is in the executive order. Is there some initiatives that would benefit the city of Oshkosh, grants or something, or some other initiatives that's coming out of Madison that the planning department could use when they talk to developers, as he mentioned. There's some other sustainability type items that can benefit, and it looks like we got several projects coming in front of us that could benefit from some type of either grant assistance, if there is going to be some grant assistance, or just what is the executive order all addressing. It talks about sustainability, clean energy shall be charged the following: develop a clean energy plan to assist the state adapting and mitigating the harm from climate change by using clean energy resources, technology. It talks about coordinate with the Department of Natural Resources. So I think at Department of Transportation, we have gone in a lot of directions that way with CNG vehicles. We've gone, as the mayor pointed out, in our strategic plan, we have information about improving our city buildings and energy efficiency. So, whatever, I would imagine Mr. Wiley, who would be, I think is your rep, could reach out, get that information, bring it back to the sustainability, and we move forward with it.
Seems like there's enough head nodding that I've got sufficient direction. Thank you. We'll try to do that and have Stephen get it to the SAB by their next meeting, which will be
Couple weeks.
in a few weeks. Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank
Keep
you.
it
Next.
posted. Thank you.
Next is the anti-vaping ordinance discussion. Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Lynn actually answered all of my questions previously, so it's in the works, and I guess we'll see it this winter. So.
Okay. Councilmember Peschel.
Sure. So just along that, in the housing world, the use of electronic devices, smoking devices, has been longly kind of banned in housing projects for going on about 10 years at this point. So I think that there's a real connection to that idea of the feasibility of doing something like that. Just because I know HUD has been at the forefront of making the units that they fund or partially fund to become smoke-free. And they've provided guidance of which the Oshkosh Winnebago County Housing Authority has implemented that is similar to what's in the NENA definitions of smoking devices that can be banned and outlawed.
I did notice there was a reference in the material that we were provided earlier that there's a bit of a language concern, inspection and enforcement, referencing having the power to enter any premises, which, as I understood, the proposed was initiating for public spaces. So I guess, City Manager, you wanted to comment on this. Is there potential that the state may be taking this up in the near future?
I don't think we finished our conversation. I wish the state would take it up, and then Mr. Norton wouldn't have had to come up tonight. I think there's value in what Mr. Norton pointed out, because the state, for whatever reason, isn't moving on this thing, even though there seems to be a very good groundswell of support for this. My question was going to be for council to get some direction. I think Mr. Norton's point about trying to have some consistency across the board makes a lot of sense. Certainly, the attorney's office, looking out for our interest, has to make sure that that's not out of bounds, not putting us at undue risk. But if there's an ability to be consistent, I think there's some value to that, because then you're not, trying to reconcile. When the state ultimately gets the message, which I think is part of the intent, once the state gets the message, then it's like, well, what do we do? Well, why don't you do what everybody else is doing and try to have that consistency? So it's not, as I understand, it's not doing an outright ban on sales. It's regulating it similar to how we regulated smoking and how it's currently regulated. And we've already got the youth part of it taken care of. We just need to do the regulations in the public places. Is that a fair assessment? Okay, I appreciate that.
Deputy Mayor Herman?
Mr. Roth, maybe because I know how stressed the city attorney's office is with the lack of staff at this point right now, maybe we could reach out to Assemblyman Hintz and Senator Fine and just see where they stand, and if they can give us some heads up of where the state's at, if the state is going to take it up. Because I know there's been several initiatives that have come out of the governor's office that they're hinting that they're going to block. So I don't know if this is one of them too, or not. We could at least have some upfront information where the state's at on this issue.
That's a good suggestion. We can certainly reach out and do that. Attorney Lawrence and I are actually going to be just running into the city attorney in Neenah on Thursday at the LEAP conference.
Okay.
We're talking about fees and everything. So, is that what you
That's
pressed the
what I
button
was
for?
going to let you know. Yes.
Okay,
I've
so-
actually talked to, and now I can't remember who it was, but I've had emails with Winnebago County Health Department. I'm actually driving up to the conference with the city attorney from Neenah.
Okay.
So we are working on it, but I want to do the research and make sure that if we pass something, that we have that background and have all that information for you.
Thank you. I think we have sufficient direction.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next is scheduling for strategic planning. Council had, I believe city manager, we had some discussion about potentially moving our strategic planning schedule.
It was interesting that the timing of council's discussion and staff's discussion, Mr. Fitzpatrick and I were looking at trying to get the strategic plan adopted by June so that when we begin the budget process in July, staff can start putting it together with the strategic plan in mind. So I think we are on the same wavelength. It's really more an issue. There's pros and cons of so many different approaches. What I heard from the mayor and deputy mayor was that starting it in the first quarter it seemed to be a preference of council. There's, like I said, there's pros and cons to each approach. The downside of that approach is that there are elections in April. It may or may not be the same people that are going to ultimately adopt the plan. So I throw that out not to tell you, no, you can't do it. You can do it. It's just a matter of would you be submitting essentially by June a strategic plan that may have a whole new set of people, and then they may want to revisit it depending on what kind of turnover you have with council and everything. That's always an unknown. That will always be an unknown, but certainly want to throw it out there for council to consider.
Councilmember Allison Osby?
Thank you. And I appreciate that comment. I mean, to your point, Mr. Roloff, it could turn over, it does. Usually there's some type of element of turnover every election cycle, but given the last two times we've done it, and especially, 2 years ago, there was such a lack of attendance, and I think part of it is due to the year. So I don't think elections really should necessarily influence, because it's been a while since we've had a full 7 council members attend the strategic planning session that's scheduled in July.
Yeah, there's pros and cons, and you've just pointed out the big con with doing it in July.
Whenever it's decided to be held, I think certainly the dates, if they could, if we could utilize some of the doodle polling technology ahead of time, that may be helpful as well. So this council, we need to give direction on where in the cycle we would like to see that. So I think there's potential for multiple variations of this. Deputy Mayor Herman, excuse me.
I just to that, I think that we as a group kind of discussed first quarter. So I think it needs to be discussed. And no matter when it gets completed, there's always going to be adjustments to it. It's a working document. Remember, we talked about that. It's a working document. It can get some changes, even though it might be down. Maybe there's an area that a future council wants more emphasis before we redo the document again. So I think first quarter is definitely February, so that sometime in February, March, I mean, I don't know if we need a full day, if we can, because we're tweaking it, that we can do it in a couple of workshops and have a later workshop, maybe a short council meeting and have a workshop on the strategic and do it that way, or do it on an off Tuesday.
As sort of a middle ground, if you wanted to do it in the first quarter, what you could do is typically after the retreat or whatever it is, we had, the last time the council and the staff, it was really a half day.
Right.
You could have staff work on putting the final version together after, say, a half-day retreat, then bring it back to the new council in its draft form so that the new council, newly seated council, has some ownership in it. Getting it done by June is certainly the important part from our standpoint. That would enable you to have more time to spend it. We could do a workshop, say, in May, and just say, are we on the right track? Then the new council members, if there are any, could say, yes, we're good, no, we're not good. Then they'd have to revisit it. Ideally, we were trying to get it done by June.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
I agree with city manager roll-off. I understand the concern about trying to get it done before the budget, and we agree. And there are also parts of the process that involve staff. We talk to the supervisors in advance before we get to the council with the department heads. So there's a fair amount of preparation that takes place. And we talked a little bit about new council members too. And in fairness to those new council members, the idea of saddling them with, trying to establish that strategic plan right out of the gate, that's a real tall order, especially for any council member, but especially for a new one. So, as a compromise, I think May is a possibility. It's not specifically in that first quarter, but it's closer to that first quarter. And then that way it would give council members some time to, if new council members are elected, to get their feet on the ground and have some sort of an orientation where they can, participate fully or as fully as they can before we go forward with the process. So I like the suggestion of May.
Would council be open to doing the retreat draft work in the first quarter, so before end of March, and finalizing that with a partial workshop after a potential new council is seated in the May timeframe? Councilmember Allison Osby?
Maybe. Because to Mr. Fitzpatrick's point, if you have somebody newly elected, like, this election cycle, we had Mr. Peschel, but he already had his council legs before, so he was able to adapt very, very quickly, even though it had been a few years in between. When a new council member comes on, it is 3 to 6 months, I think, before they truly grow their council legs. So, whether it's May or whether it's June, they are still typically overwhelmed. So to me, I appreciate what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're also saying about staff preparation. But again, there was, I think, almost unanimous consensus that we get it done the first quarter of the year.
Deputy Mayor Herman?
And I would concur to that, partly because I believe that there's some goals in here, that there are some things, a strategic plan that need a little more attention. So I look at that as goals for you to get your staff and people to get that accomplished. And the farther we push that into June, July, August, that's less time they can work on it and have it ready. Again, you know, a lot of this work was done by previous councils. Well, even before I was on council, they had a strategic plan. And since I've been on in going on my 10th year, we haven't made a lot of changes to this. I think we've emphasized things differently as the city has changed and things like that. But the overall goals and different objectives haven't changed a lot over the years, I don't think. And I've been in 4 or 5 of those workshops, so that's just my thought.
Councilmember Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there, I think we're split on this, Ken. Is there a compromise here for all of us to give them direction on this? I mean, is April, May kind of a compromise?
Well, I think we can do something in the first quarter. It's just a matter of when the final document gets approved. I think we're still going to, if you want it approved in the retreat and approved in the first quarter, I would recommend that you have the retreat in January, because it does take 6-8 weeks for us to flesh it all out and then give it to you in a form that's acceptable for your consideration. So I would suggest, if you want to do it have it completed in the first quarter, do it in January. If you're looking at approval, you know, our suggestion was no later than June. You can do it earlier. There's nothing wrong with doing it earlier. Just don't do it later than June. We were on the same page from my standpoint. So if you wanted to approve the first quarter, I would just move that to January. If you're more like, you know, May, June-ish, then we could have the retreat February, March. That's really the difference we're talking about.
Just a quick question, and then Councilmember Mugrauer. Is there any reason why we couldn't do this in the first quarter? If a new council ends up being seated, they could always bring it back and ask to modify, correct?
Council could do it any time. That's not always recommended, but yeah, you've got.
I'm just saying it
There's a
could
lot
happen
more
that
lead
way.
time that way. You could certainly do that.
Councilmember Mugrauer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Unless, and I don't like throwing city manager roll-off under the bus, but every once in a while you have to. Unless I hear,
It was mentioned twice tonight, so I'm
exactly,
a little worried.
the proverbial bus. Unless I hear, I guess, some specific reasons as to we should not do this early in the first quarter from you and Assistant City Manager and HR Director Fitzpatrick, Council was in near unanimous agreement that we have it completed by end of first quarter for a reason.
Okay.
And so to that point, a January retreat is what would need to happen then to make that happen. With our intention that we wanted it done, that's what we knew that going into it. That's what I believe that's what the intention was of council, to express to you guys that we'd like it done sooner. To Mr. Councilmember Herman's point, there are some, objectives that we would like to see tied to whether it's city manager goals, as well as just given enough time to complete those in the next 2020 cycle that we move it up. With respect to whatever new council sitting late April, I can't control that. I can only do what's in front of us, and we try to make the best decisions possible. To the mayor's point, there's plenty of opportunities for any council members to bring things up, to make adjustments to the plan if needed. But we shouldn't hold back progress just because of the impending election. Let's move forward.
So I guess.
Council, wait, one moment. So just to be clear, the near unanimous consensus on this was about initiating this sooner. We did not specify finalization in that, but perhaps that was the spirit or the intent. Just to add that.
Yeah, so, yeah, I understood starting it, so now I'm hearing starting and finishing first quarter, then I would absolutely recommend you want to do it in January. So then my question would be, half-day retreat in January? I don't have, I can have Diane put out a doodle poll to get some feedback on what's available. Do you want me to throw into that like a weekend option, like a Saturday, or do you just want to try to do an evening one, an evening retreat, or a daytime? If let me know what your pleasures are, just throw the options out and see where the chips fall.
I think do that one. Just
Give you a
see
variety
what-
of
yeah,
options?
Variety of options, see what.
Yep.
And
see what
maybe
works.
include a Saturday option in the
Give
doodle.
Saturday option. I'll give you a Saturday option, a day, a week, night, and a weekday option at a minimum. Okay, very good. Appreciate the feedback.
Okay. So next is budget workshops for October 28th and 29th, 8 to 4:30 PM, both days, room 404 here in council chambers, actually 404.
That's the plan, and then, of course, the budget hearing on November
Public
6th.
Budget hearing November 6th, 2019 at 5 PM, again in this location. There will be a budget workshop immediately following the budget hearing. Councilmember Peschel.
Sure. Just a question. We found these new capital improvement programs in our seats today. Is there any changes in this document compared to the one that was provided to us last month that we should be aware of?
I was as surprised as you, and I have that same question for
Okay.
staff, and I was
Is Mr.
approached
Van
by...
Gompel up here?
Okay, well, Mr. Robbie got
All
my
right.
email then as well, because I asked the same question.
Part of the reason is my administrative assistant is accustomed to providing you a new copy at this stage in the game.
Okay.
There are also a few minor changes. When I got Mr. Roloff's email right before the meeting, I did forward that to her and say we need to put together a summary of some documents. One change that immediately comes to mind, at the previous meeting, you did a CIP amendment for the paving of Furnow Avenue Court, or Furnow Court. Your previous versions of the 2020 CIP had that Furnow Court paving in, so you already did an amendment so we could get it done this year, so we took it out of next year. So there are a few tweaks, but we'll get a summary put together for you.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
All right, next is the second opportunity for citizen statements to council. Do we have anyone registered? I know Mr. Norton spoke earlier, even though he was registered for the second one.
No one is registered.
All right. Next, council member announcements and statements. Anyone have anything? All right. And city manager announcements and statements.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's a status outstanding issues. A couple things got taken off because things were completed or at least reached a certain point. The Oshkosh Corporation update is in there. I think it's probably the last update that you're going to see with the text, because I think they're getting close to doing their grand opening. So once they do that, I don't know if there's necessarily related to Oshkosh Corporation. It'll probably be more about Lakeshore Park. What I will add to the outstanding issues, based on council direction just now, I'll put the greenhouse gas emissions item on there, and the anti-vaping ordinance. City attorney already indicated probably be after the first of the year, so I'll give a date forward for that one. And the strategic planning, until we get the date set, I'll put that in there as well. With that, if you have any questions about the status of outstanding issues, otherwise I'll just keep moving. We've got 3 agreements. One with Split Rock Studio for the design of the sporting and recreation exhibition. Mayor asked me that amount. It was in the memo, but it was not on the agenda. It's $30,000 and some change. Excuse me, I'll get the exact amount, $30,500. Then there's also the training management software for the fire department, and the professional services agreement with Associated Financial Group. They're the group that assists us in getting the bids, solicitations for our health insurance. And this is their annual contract, so that's the services they provide us. And so we put that in there. It doesn't meet the $75,000 threshold for council approval, but it's over $25,000. Anything between $25,000 and $75,000 requires me to report, so that's why these 3 items are on the agenda. And third quarter strategic plan review. Council's received a hard copy as well as an electronic copy. With respect to the strategic plan, I'm happy to report, this is the third quarter report, so we're about a third of the way through our 2-year strategic plan, and 34% are completed. So completion is real consistent with how far we are along in the process. The major, the disruption rate is less than 3%. We're very pleased with that. Most of that is actually in the parks area, because some of the parks projects are dependent on good weather, and we have not had that this summer, and we've had several delays. By the way, if you'd like to see a really cool video, Ray produced something, or Ray received something from the contractor that did the ball field at Rainbow Memorial Park that Sid Supley was part of the fundraising effort for. It's a pretty cool process, but rain was a challenge there, but we've had rain for a lot of projects this summer. So that's the primary reason for the delays. But things are in general on track. There is a larger executive summary that if there are any questions about any specific strategic goals, I can certainly answer questions. And then also in your electronic packet, we didn't give you a paper copy because it's 60 pages long, and that is the quarterly report on KPI. So very pleased. Courtney Jenks on Mr. Fitzpatrick's staff done an outstanding job of basically harassing department heads until they comply. And I think, and I also want to thank Chiefs Stanley and Smith. They took a great deal of effort, as you saw during a workshop a few months ago, about showing the value of KPIs in terms of achieving strategic plans and making it a good story to tell, especially when you're talking about budgets. You know, how can you translate some data into why things should be funded? This is always going to be a work in progress, but I'm very pleased with the progress we're making on the things that are reflected in the KPIs. There's a couple missing ones, and they were pointed out to me, and we're working on those. Some are brand new, so we won't have anything until the end of the year, but I'm very pleased with the process. Mr. Fitzpatrick and I have been asked to address groups because this isn't done by a lot of cities. We're still getting our sea legs on it, but I'm still very proud of the work we're doing, and I think it demonstrates that we're committed to not just working on the strategic plan, but demonstrating the progress that we're making. So happy to answer any questions with all my caveats that it's not perfect. We're always going to be working on it, but I'm very pleased and proud of staff for the work and happy to take comments, critical or otherwise.
I do have a question. Where would the public be able to access that KPI report?
I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Fitzpatrick.
We do have a public dashboard that's up for the citizens to take a look at, and they can access that. I think it's on our Hot Topics page, so they can click on that and look at the public dashboard. In terms of specific details, more details that are provided in regard to the KPIs. We have in the past provided narratives, but that's something that we didn't include in the public dashboard just because it's so much volume. So we're happy to answer any other questions that anybody has. And they can direct them to us. They can direct them to, my office, and we'll be happy to answer those.
But we'll also be including those KPIs as they relate to each of the budget departments in the budget document, correct?
Yes, right. New Finance Director Van Gompel is working on modifying the budget document format a little bit. So it's going to be, as City Council or as City Manager Roloff has indicated, the strategic planning is linked with the budget process, and then also the council's done a very good job of illustrating strategic management. Without the strategic plan and linking it to the budget and then executing all those plans, we wouldn't have been able to get all the things done that council has achieved over the past few years. So.
And then I just had one final question. You were referencing some minimal disruption. Just noticing as this relates to Jane's earlier comments during citizen statements about speed and that, wondering what the 33% disruption is on improving transportation safety within the community? What would that, because that wouldn't be weather related, what would that?
If you could help me out, just which
Page,
Page 5.
Objective 2.7, page 5,
2.7, okay, thank you.
lower right-hand corner.
2.7. Just give
Right.
me time to find it.
I think it might be,
Well, it's actually even, it's 33% across the board.
right, I'm trying to find
on-track
the
disruption
specific
and
action that we
completed.
have.
Yeah, that's a, I believe that has something to do, well, no, I don't want to say that. There's, I can give you some details within improving traffic safety, traffic review advisory boards, speed watch, and then Citizens Academy traffic laws and stops. So it may be some of that.
I think it's not listed on the specific, but don't hold me to this. I think my memory is correct. I know that the chief and also Transportation Director Collins has been working on trying to come up with strategies to improve safety in the roundabout areas.
Okay.
You know, as Doherty mentioned, you know, we have a lot of people that I think they enjoy the ability to move through those intersections quickly, but we also are cognizant of the pedestrians, and just looking left is not enough for us to ensure their safety. So, you know, with the motorcycle patrol and also some of the efforts that Jim Collins is trying to implement, it's something that's a work in progress. We've talked about additional measures that could be taken. When Transportation Director Chris Strong was here, we were able to secure a grant for flashing beacons at the Murdoch roundabout. But those flashing beacons are very expensive. And it's something that certainly we think helps create awareness for pedestrians, but it's very costly, and the number of roundabouts that we have in the city, as you know, is very high. So it's something that we're still trying to work on to try to improve, and we didn't think it was fair for us to indicate that everything was on track and completed in consideration of that.
Councilmember Miller?
Thank you, Mayor. It fits to follow up with these roundabouts. These things are miserable at some intersections. Witzel and Kohler out there, I mean, where the elevation is, you're above and you actually can't see somebody going down there. So, I mean, I would encourage Jim, or I don't know if Jim's still here, but get us as much grant money to put these things up, because these roundabouts are terrible. And I know the state saddled us with them, and we didn't have a lot of input into them, but yeah, these are a real pedestrian pain in the you-know-what.
Yeah, I think, you know, the DOT has done tremendous work on, you know, crash analysis, and the angles of crashes and the movement through those intersections is reduced. But I think the pedestrian safety is something that we're certainly concerned about and want to try to improve any way we can.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're not the only ones struggling with it, but we got to deal with it.
All right, so any other discussion on strategic plan measures? Deputy Mayor has a motion for us to go into closed session.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that following the adjournment of this meeting, that the council may convene in the closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C of the Wisconsin State Statutes to discuss the performance evaluation and compensation regarding the city manager and employee over which the Common Council has jurisdiction and exercises responsibility.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Or, I'm sorry.
No.
Nope.
Roll call
Roll
on
call.
that motion.
Yeah.
I'm jumping to adjourn.
Allison Osby? Aye. Herman?
Aye.
Ugerauer?
Aye.
Krause?
Aye.
Peschel?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Palmieri?
Aye.
Carried 7.
Now, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.